What are you thirsty for? Happy Thirsty Thursday with me, Jake Thurston, and today we're talking about God's name. One of the 10 Commandments is do not take God's name in vain. In other words, don't disrespect God's name. And we're commanded not to do that because God's name is exceptionally powerful. Of course, this is because, it's the name of the God of the universe, right? And God has tons of names to summarize his whole character. You have Jehovah, you have Yahweh, you have the Lord, you have God, you have, so many other official names that I can't even think of off the top of my head. And the reason why we're told not to take God's name in vain, again, is because it is exceptionally more powerful than we could ever imagine. We're told to praise his name, right? We're told to give glory to God's name, and we're even commanded by Jesus to go and speak his name to other people, tell other people about God's name, about who he is. However, God's name isn't just something that we need to tell other people. Like, we're not supposed just to go out and tell other people about who God is. Like, that's a large part of our calling. But there's also a lot that happens to us when we call upon God's name. This whole thing that I'm talking about really came from a quote in a book that I read this past week that just really stuck with me, that I really wanted to share with you guys. And the quote says this: talking about Jesus Christ actually deepens our identity as people who follow him, while simultaneously extending Christ's call to others. Get this. In Hebrew tradition, uttering God's name is the same as invoking God's power. Uttering God's name is the same as invoking God's power. So proclaiming the name of the triune God, therefore, is a formative act. It changes things, and it changes us by widening the cracks of creation where God enters the world. So essentially, calling upon God's name should never be taken lightly, because when we call on God's name, we are actually invoking God's power. What we talk about in our daily life shows a lot about who we are. And oftentimes, the more we talk about certain things, the more we begin to believe those things, and the more it begins to shape us. And so I wonder, if we're looking to grow as Christians, and we're looking to grow as people of God, I have to ask us, how often are we actually talking about him? How often are we giving a testimony about the goodness of God? How often are we quick to tell our friends about who God is, to speak his name? Because that's not just to tell other people about God's faithfulness. It's also to grow us as people. Because something formative, something transformative happens when we speak God's name. So maybe that should cause us to think twice about how we use God's name.